if you go out into the country, away from all of the city hustle and bustle and everything, what do you start seeing? Huh? Birds. You start noticing that the corn's coming up. It's already broke the ground, and you can see all of these little things. Soybeans, if they're doing the soybeans, you can already see the soybeans starting to come up. Now, when they planted those, and this year they had to wait a little bit longer because of the cold weather, and so they got a late planting this year, which a lot of times you think it's going to be a late harvest, but not necessarily. Kind of depends on how much rain and sunshine and everything else that we get during the summer. Now, when we left a couple of weeks ago, right before Mother's Day, and we left here, it was cold. And we come back here, and now it's hot, which tells me that we went straight from winter to summer. There was very little spring this year. Spring we got way back in January and February, okay? So when that farmer plants that seed, what is he expecting? A harvest. Exactly. He's not expecting that the seeds are going to basically come into the barn or the silo or anything by themselves. He's going to have to do a harvest. Okay? And one of the things, if you look at Matthew chapter 9, the very end of this chapter, the last 4 verses, is something that we overlook a lot of times. Look at what he says. Then Jesus went to a town in a village. Is that what it said? Huh? And Jesus went to all the towns and villages. He didn't just say he went to a town. He went to all the towns and all the villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease, or every disease and every sickness. Now look, when he saw the crowds, he felt compassion for them. Why? Because they were weary and worn out, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is what? King James says plenty. Mine says abundant. But the workers are few. Therefore, pray that to the Lord of the harvest to what? To send out workers where? Into whose harvest? His harvest. Not my harvest. Not your harvest. But into his harvest. Sometimes, here's where I'm coming from, and sometimes it's like, if I could say this, the old expression is like preaching to the choir. But sometimes we have forgotten some things. Because when you look at this, look at what it said. When he saw the crowds, he what? He felt compassion for them. Look at what he's relating to. He's saying he went into where? All of the villages, all of the towns. He healed them of every sickness and every disease. When he saw these people in these towns, not one town, not two towns, when he saw all the people in all the towns, he felt compassion for them. And he said to his disciples, he says, the workers are few. The harvest is great. Would you pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest? So many times we have forgotten that the compassion of Christ is everybody out here. It isn't the ones we select. It's the ones he selects. He says there's plenty of people out here. I was talking to a group of people Tuesday afternoon, I think it was, and there was only 10 of us representing 6 churches in Middletown. Okay. A lot of people talk about missions and missionaries. Okay. Not everybody is a missionary to go to Africa. Not everybody's a missionary to go to the Philippines. Okay? But do you understand that God has called you all to be missionaries here in Middletown? Here? To the people that come here? And sometimes we forget what we're supposed to be doing. Many people believe that this church is for them. No, it isn't. This isn't for them. It's for the people that God directs here, whoever they may be. People that come here that are hurting. Plenty of them. And what did he say? He says that if this is my compassion, then it needs to be our compassion too. So many times we want to look outside. And what he's saying is, you know, what you all need to be praying for is that God would send workers to help in the harvest. Because we don't have an automated process. They planted with mules or oxens. And they planted with the plow that someone beat in there and made a row. And somebody went down through there planting the stuff. It wasn't a mechanized planting like we see today, to where we can make all of the rows straight. And they've calculated that if you plant the corn X amount of spaces apart, you get a better yield per acre. And so what you got to do then is you set up your automated machinery to automatically go down X amount of rows and plant it every so often so that the corn will not be too crowded in one space and too far apart in the other. And so you get a good yield out of that. And the problem is that so many times what we want to do is, okay, they've mechanized the planting process, so we want to mechanize our harvest and our planting. And it isn't a mechanization. It is a one-on-one with people. It's making relationships. Getting down and talking to people that sometimes you don't like. The way they look, the way they act, the way they smell. It's like, whew, boy, I'm glad this service is over. Man, oh my, that person really needed to take a bath. Okay, well, there's a shower. I got plenty of soap and water for anybody. There's towels, you know. And if they want, we got a dryer and a washing machine in the back to clean their clothes. And so many times we want to be in our space of our comfort and understanding that if this is his harvest, ladies and gentlemen, it's got to be ours too. It's got to be ours. You see, look at what he said. He said he felt compassion for them because why? They were weary and worn out. How many people do you know that's outside of here that's weary and worn out? They've been beat down so much. They don't know where to turn. They don't know what to do. And he says they're weary and they're worn out. Why? Because they're like sheep without a shepherd. Sheep without a shepherd will just go. Someone takes the lead and they just go. They have no idea where they're going. They're just going to go somewhere. And he says that's the way people are. He said he looked at them and they were hurting, they were weary, they were worn out because nobody would talk to them and tell them where they needed to go. And he's saying we need to address the situation and feel the same kind of passion because we need to understand that the lost of this harvest need to have the gospel preached to them. We talked about it this morning. We've been talking about it on Wednesday night in talking about Timothy. And when Paul told Timothy, he says, Timothy, he says, you got to understand something. You are going to suffer for the gospel, but understand what the gospel does. The gospel brings people to salvation. And that's what you got to continue to teach them and talk to them about. Because they're lost. And this world is lost. Our kids are lost. This is why Diana was talking with Mark and I, and most of you all are here on Sunday night. You're going to understand what I'm talking about, okay? And she was saying, I went down through the list of people that regularly attend the church. And I came up with 44 people that possibly could be involved in Awana. But every year we beg. How many people will help us? We sit there on Sunday night sometimes and it's like, okay, who's going to do what? You know, okay, we've got to take this one out of Sparky's because we don't have enough people, and yet they've got 28 kids in there and 2 people, and this class over here, they got 7 and they got 1. And which, how do we do this? And understanding, guys and gals, and you're going to hear me talk about this. If we don't teach our kids, we lose our kids. We lose them. And when I say our kids, I'm not talking about kids that are related to you. Okay? How many of you all have noticed any of the changes in this church in the last 2 weeks? Okay. What kind of changes have you noticed? Huh? The attendance is what?
Gone down.
No, it hasn't.
Just the kids aren't here.
The kids aren't here. I understand that. But the attendance has been the same.
But not in the Awana.
Right. If you're talking about Awana, that's correct. But part of that was we lose them as soon as school starts ending. Right before the last week or so of school, you lose them. And part of that is not our fault. It's what other changes? Someone? Okay, you got a cameras looking at you. Yes, they are. Okay, so now we can look at the cameras and I can go back and say, I know exactly who was here. I can pinpoint.
Mulch in front.
Huh? We got mulch in the front.
Yes. You redid the smoking area.
Huh?
You redid the
We redid the smoking area.
Which isn't just
well, which isn't just.
Okay. We've patched the parking lot. Huh? The grass was cut. Huh? I think you'll hear me. Welcome to Calvary. We're glad you're here. Where strangers become friends and friends become family. Always pray to have eyes that see the best in people, a heart that forgives the worst, a mind that forgets the bad, and a soul that never loses faith in God. Number one. This is good, man. I can walk around with this stuff. I'm not confined. One day can change you, your outlook, everything. Your heart, your mind, your family, your life, your eternity. All of these are put here intentionally. They weren't just, okay, let's just put something up. Welcome. Welcome here. We're glad you're here. All of this is intentional. Why? To teach people that church is family. Church is not individuals. Learning that we need to take the gospel to the power of God, and we need to take it to everybody, our kids. And so I asked the question, so who are our kids? All of these kids that are walking through these doors, they're our kids. We're their parents. And may I say this to you? We are probably the only parents they really have in a lot of these families. Most of these kids are raising themselves. Parents are non-existent. Or the person that's in there isn't even really their parent. You know how many grandparents are raising their grandchildren today? Because where's mom and dad? Maybe sitting in jail. And so somebody had to raise the child. And so it behooves us to understand that the Lord of the harvest says we need to send workers because the harvest is great, but the workers are few. And sometimes we need to understand something, because the laborers in the harvest are commanded to pray. And in the book of Psalms, it tells us this. It tells us to sow in tears. And if you sow in tears, you know what you're going to reap? Joy in the morning. There are some times when these kids come in here, man, they break our hearts with some of the stories they tell you. You know, someone walk in here, guys, and I've got 2 mommies.
Because my real mommy died.
Yeah, because my real mommy died. And so someone is taking care of me. But yet, what are they learning? They're learning 2 mommies. Some of these kids, you walk in there, they're in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, they can't even read. And I heard this statement by one of the people that I was with on Tuesday night. And it is absolutely the truth. If you can't read, you can't do anything. Do you understand, in order to do math, you have to be able to read? And if you've got kids that are in 1st, 2nd grade, and they can't read, they're going to get passed on by. They can't keep up. They can't get a job. And guess what? If they can't keep a job or get a job, guess where they're going to end up? On the streets. Because on the street, they believe they can make money. I can make money quick selling drugs. I can make money quick by stealing something out of someone's house and doing this. Middletown this week, a 17-year-old boy, his mother told him, don't go out there. You need to stay on the porch. They had had issues with each other, and the 17-year-old boy gets shot in the neck laying in the street. Because of what? Nothing else to do. I read in Hamilton, there was a guy talking about another young man that got shot in Hamilton. And they said, why? And he says, because the houses right over here don't have air conditioning. They're the projects, if you know where they're at, around Front Street and Wilson, right there in that part of Hamilton. And they said they don't have air conditioning. So in the summertime, guess where they're coming? Out of the house to the street. Trying to stay cool, but guess what happens? They get a bunch of kids starting hanging around, and the next thing you know, there's trouble. There's fights. Because they don't know any different. And what God is saying is, if we begin to understand the concern for these kids and sow in tears, it ought to break our hearts. It ought to break our hearts. But it breaks our heart with the stories, but then when they come to us and they tell us, hey, you told this story and you asked about Jesus coming into my life, and I want to do that right now. You may be sowing in tears because of the stories that you hear, but you're reaping in joy because you're making an impact on a child. And I can I can say this from the bottom of my heart. A young lady came to church today. Was a young lady that I met 30-some years ago. And she says, I need to talk to you. You know where she was from? Awana. 30-some years ago.
Amen.
In 30 years, and it's still making an impact. Sometimes we don't think they get it. We think they're not listening. We think they don't care. That's the life of a pastor, guys and gals. Because sometimes you think they're not getting it. They're not listening. And then all of a sudden, someone comes out of the blue and says something to you like, whoa, thank you. And I'm thinking, and I really didn't think you were listening. And to understand, you're sowing in tears, but you're reaping in joy because you're seeing the effect, not of what you're doing, but the effects of the gospel. And this is where Paul told Timothy, as we were learning on Wednesday night, hey, we're sold out to this thing. Yes, it's going to hurt. And yes, it's painful. But in the end, it is automatic rejoicing to understand that this is the harvest. It's white. You don't understand how ripe it is outside. But if all we do is stay inside, we never understand what the harvest is really like. So we need to understand something. It says here, therefore pray to the Lord of the harvest. He didn't say to just pray. Pray to the Lord of the harvest. So who cares about the harvest? God does. God cares about the harvest. And we need to understand that if He cares, we need to care. We need to be motivated to do these things. Okay? And what's going to happen? Look at this. Pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into His harvest. Now, generally out in California, Florida, there are crops that you've got to pick by hand. If you try to put a machine on those crops, it will destroy them. So you'll see groups of people that one day they'll be over here picking out of this field, and the next day they'll migrate over and they'll pick out of this field, or they'll pick out of this field, or they'll pick out of this field. They will travel in bunches looking for the fields that are ripe to harvest so they can go in and work those fields. Now, if that worker doesn't go into that field and pick those crops, what's going to happen to the crop? They're going to dry up on the vine. They're going to fall to the ground. They're going to rot. Fruit that at one point in time, or crops that were ripe for the harvest, that all of a sudden nobody picked it. And because nobody was willing to go pick the crops, they rotted. Don't you understand that God's giving us a crop? And He's saying, pray. Pray. Why? Pray that the Lord will send more workers into the harvest. Because if the workers don't go to the harvest, God's already doing the harvest. He's doing the planting. He's already done the watering. And He's saying, here's the crops. They're growing, guys. We need to go work and work the crops in the things that are there. And what we need to understand is when we decide to follow God's word and not our plans, then the harvest is going to be plentiful. In this church, we've got to get out of our plans. I plan to do this, or I plan to do that. I understand. There's ways to plan things. But what we've got to understand is God is saying, y'all get out of here. During the summer, you're going to be able to reach out to many, many people. And he's saying, y'all need to get out of your comfort zone and reach out. Make friends. Make relationships. And sometimes those relationships, when we try to make them, they're not always going to work out the way you want them to work out. But this ain't working out the way you and I want it to work out. We were talking Tuesday, and they were asking, what is one of the greatest strengths in your churches? And one of the guys spoke up, and one of the greatest strengths are hindrances in your church. And the one guy spoke up, and he said, here's what we have. We have all of these committees, we have all of these rules, we have all of these things, and you can't do anything. If you want to buy a mop, you got to go to the committee. If you want to talk to somebody, you got to go to a committee. If you want to do this, you got to do this committee. And somebody else was talking. And I made this statement. And I said, we don't have that problem. If something ain't working, we change it. And I said, and I really don't hear a lot of screaming and hollering about it. Because if you realize it's not working, then you change it real quick. That you don't get stuck in a rut. That this is the way it's got to be done. No, it isn't. Because there are sometimes we need to understand it's God's way. And what's God's asking to do? Debbie's been here for quite a while. When we came in here and we wanted to change the songs, wasn't good. When we wanted to get rid of the hymn books, and we really wasn't getting rid of the hymn books, we were just putting the words up here so people could see them. The hymn books, if you look at the hymn books are in small print. And most of the people here needed bifocals and trifocals. And they couldn't even see the hymn books unless they were large print, and they weren't large print. And so we said, okay, we'll put them up here so you can see the words. But yet they were so used to, I got to have this in my hand. And so they couldn't do anything about praising the Lord. Okay, it just didn't work. Didn't happen. Okay, you couldn't put nails in the wall. You couldn't put, if you wanted to put anything on the wall, it had to be with tape. And if you put anything on the walls with tape and the piece of the wallpaper came off, you were screamed and hollered and yelled at. How dare you do these things? And who said you could move this? And honest, some of y'all weren't here, but this actually happened. There was a visitor that came into church one day, sat in the row of the pew, and an elderly lady walked up and stood in the aisle looking at the person, and you could hear it from the front. And the person says, excuse me, you need something? Yeah, you need to move, you're in my seat. People got upset because visitors are sitting in their seat. Well, I'm sorry, but the visitor didn't know that. You know? And this is what I'm saying. Sometimes we get stuck in ruts. And sometimes we need to get out of the ruts. And we need to get out. Because there's a harvest out here, guys. None of us know how much longer we're going to be here. We don't. We're all getting older. And we all got issues. And we got problems. And sometimes our feet hit the floor and we say, thank you, Jesus. You know, because I can feel them, the floor. I can feel my feet. But God is bringing people in this church more and more. There was a gentleman this morning that was sitting in the next to the last row. Ladies and gentlemen, he's in hospice. He doesn't know how much longer he's going to be here. They've already told him there's nothing else we can do. He is a Christian. But he walked away from the Lord. Now he's doing the best he can to find his way back, not knowing how much longer he's going to have. He's got 2 daughters and a son. Both of the daughters have been here. The one daughter came. She brought her one daughter with her the first time, I think, or two people, right? 2. Brought 4 this morning. A young lady showed up Wednesday night from over where Debbie Roberts used to live, saying, I've seen you guys over there and I've seen you walk by. I'm trying to get my life straight. We're hearing other people walking in and from all over the place. God is sending a harvest here, guys. We just need workers. We need to pray, God, send us workers. When we were meeting Tuesday, somebody made this statement. I'm not from Middletown, so I don't know all of the ins and outs of Middletown. I just know what I've seen in the last 10 or 11 years since I've been here. And some of them have been here 7 years and some others and stuff. And here's what they said. We have never ever seen a pulling together of the people in Middletown as we have seen lately. And something big is going to happen. And God is moving in huge ways. And the question to each and every one of us was, are y'all ready? Are you? Because our mission field is here. It's here. And God's sending us out to work the harvest. The question arises is, are we ready? And tonight I just hope and pray that you are.
Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30, with our morning worship following at 10:45. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening and during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with the Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.